Hello, and welcome to our very first annual movie report card. This is going to be kind of my best of the year video for the year. I'm joined by my wife, Hannah, for this.
What's up?
Kyle would join us for this, but he did not see that many movies that came out last year, so his input would be very limited here. For the record, I've seen about 76 or so of the films that came out last year. Hannah, you saw about like 30?
33?
33. Yeah, it's going to be kind of my list of my top 10, and then we're going to have a couple of other things like some superlatives, and just kind of then we're going to grade the year as a whole and just kind of talk about how we felt about the year 2023. We're right up on the Oscars now, so the whole best of the year conversation is happening now.
It's a buzz.
It's a buzz. So here's us joining in on it. But yeah, to start us off, I'm going to start with our best in class. This is going to be my list of my top 10 films of the year. And after I go through the 10 of them and some honorable mentions off the top, then we're going to talk about it. And Hannah's going to bring up some of her favorites that maybe I didn't bring up or maybe I did. So yeah, let's just get right to it. All right, before I get into it, here's the honorable mentions. I'm just going to list them off. These are the films that didn't quite make my top 10. This year had a lot of great movies in it. I will say it's not my favorite year of the last number of years of film, but I feel like we're on the right trajectory. We're getting back to it where we're getting a number of really great films. It was really hard to nail this down to just 10 here. I will say that I don't have like that film this year that just absolutely floored me in every way, that just blew me away completely. Not like a perfect 10 out of 10 for me this year, but there were still a lot of really great films. So, kicking off my honorable mentions, I just want to bring up The Killer, The Holdovers, Suzume, Society of the Snow, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So yeah, those are the ones. I loved all of those films that I just mentioned. They just didn't quite make my top 10 for the year. But now going into it, my number 10 film is Past Lives, Best Picture nominee. I didn't get to watch it until after it was the nominations and everything for the Oscars were already out, but I'm really glad I did. This is one of those indie darling kind of movies that it's really quiet, but it just kind of stays with you as you're watching it. It's a really solid exploration of the complexity of relationships and moving away and these kind of dormant feelings that just kind of stay there until they're reawakened by something. And there's a great beauty in this film, particularly in the cinematography and the way it just kind of keeps these characters, they're always at a distance from each other, and it's really just a lovely film. But on to number 9, John Wick Chapter 4. You rarely get an action movie as good as this one. It's just nonstop. It's almost 3 hours long, and it's just going all out the whole time. I just had a blast with this movie. I am fond of genre films, action films, and this is one of the better ones I've seen in the last number of years. So this one definitely made my list. All right, on to number 8 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I have been following Marvel this whole time. I do like Marvel films. It has been a little disappointing the last few years, not always living up to the standard that they really did set for themselves. But among the Marvel films, my favorites have always been the Guardians films, particularly the second one. Maybe not the most popular opinion in the world, but that one still remains my favorite of the MCU films that they've ever made. And Guardians 3 came up right close to it, though. I loved this movie. I had a great time with it. It kind of brought me back to those what now looks like the golden days of Marvel. We'll see if they can get back to it at some point, but this one really just stuck the landing for all these characters that I've come to love, and it just delivered on all fronts for me. So yeah, that's my number 8. Moving on, number 7 is Godzilla minus one. We had a few great foreign releases that actually got some wide releases here in the States. Maybe it's just taking advantage of a lighter release schedule, but Godzilla's minus one definitely came out and made waves. And it made waves simply because it's a great film. It's way better than you would ever even expect it to be. I'm a big Godzilla fan. I've enjoyed both classic Godzilla and I've enjoyed the recent legendary Godzilla, but this might be the very best of them all. It quite possibly is. And it just kind of nails the human character side of things and delivers on the Godzilla kaiju-ness of it all at the same time. So it does both well, which is rare to say for a movie like this, but I just had a blast with it. It's a great film. All right, number 6 is Asteroid City. This one's being left out, I think, of the whole awards race. Even if you're not a fan of it, you can't deny the production values here and the unique qualities that Wes Anderson always brings. To me, this is taking his style and moving it to the next level, which for some people, I guess I can see that turning them off to his style and everything. It's just too much of the kind of kitsch that he kind of goes for. But for me, this was almost self-actualization, especially with the multiple levels. This being a play on stage visualized in his very unique way, but then also cutting back and forth to the play being set up and just all the different layers to it. I just loved this movie. I've seen it a few times and it's one of my favorites of Anderson's just that he's ever done. All right, number 5 is Killers of the Flower Moon. I actually didn't have this on my list for a while. I watched it the first time in theaters and then I watched it again, and watching it the second time in particular, because the first time I loved it, but then it kind of faded, and I'd watched so many other things that came out in between. But then watching it again, I was like, this movie's undeniable. It is an incredible film. It earns every second of its runtime. And yeah, it's number 5. All right, number 4 is Oppenheimer. Definitely one of the biggest movies of the year. It almost made $1 billion as a 3-hour historical drama. Christopher Nolan's going to win all the awards for this year. And I mean, I think that he's earned it. So this film, it really does speak for itself, and everybody's said as much as they want to about it. And this is one that, surprisingly enough, given the subject matter, it seems like most people I know have actually seen too. So it's kind of cool that that's the case with a movie like this, but it is really great. All right, number 3 is Poor Things. I've been hit or miss on Yorgos Lanthimos as a filmmaker. I love The Lobster. The Favorite to me was good, but I didn't love it like everybody else seemed to like it. And this one really worked for me. It handles very complex issues and presents them in a very unique way. Emma Stone might give, I think, the best performance of any actor from the whole year.
Mm.
And definitely not for everybody. There are things that are going to turn people off to watching this movie. For sure, particularly the sexuality and nudity is very present and a focal point of the conversation of the film for sure. But yeah, I think that Poor Things is a really tremendous film, really unique, and I loved it. All right, number 2, May December, another one that people just aren't really talking about. It got kind of buried in the whole Netflix shuffle, which I think is a shame because this is a tremendous film, particularly Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore leading the cast, and a performance I never would have expected from Charles Melton in here. But this movie deserved more love than it got. It's a fascinating exploration of the moral gray area of adapting real life circumstances and people into narrative storytelling in film. And it's a really interesting and unique look. And if you like things that are morally complex, I definitely think that you should check this one out. But that leads us to my number 1 film of the year, and that is The Boy and the Heron, or How Do You Live, which is the title I prefer. This is Hayao Miyazaki's final film, at least he says it is. I believe it this time. I believed it last time too, though. But I love Miyazaki's films in general, and that kind of is a prerequisite to even watching this, I feel like, to some extent, because it's clearly a very personal film. This is, I would say, almost his least accessible film that he's made, and it really does help to have seen his other films, and I need to watch it again for sure. But I did love it, and this was the movie, and the reason why it's my number one is that this is the one that really inspired me in that sense of wonder of filmmaking this year. This one really just kind of floored me in that capacity, and it just had me thinking a lot about the thematic material that Miyazaki was working with. And I don't even quite fully grasp it yet. That's why I need a few more watches. And maybe if this year there was that movie that came out that just absolutely floored me, this wouldn't be my number one, but there was no movie that made me think about my love of cinema in the same way that The Boy and the Heron did this year. So that's why it's my number one film. All right, Hannah, there's a few significant ones that I left off of that list. Do you have any thoughts, any of your personal favorites for the year?
Yeah, my list is completely different than yours. So I'll do what you did. I'll start with my 10, like 10, then up to 1. And my list is really based on like the impact of the film and how it like sat with me and how long it sat with me versus like actually looking at the technical filmmaking side of things. I feel like I would have a different list for that, but this is just like what hit me and what stood with me. Okay, so my number 10 is Across the Spider Verse.
It's great.
It's so great. It's fucking fantastic. I still think about the animation
It's
and that,
incredible. Yeah.
and my I love Miles' story.
Yeah.
I love his story, so I think about that. My number 9 is actually Oppenheimer. I think it was a fantastic film. Killian how do you say his name?
Yeah, you said it right.
Okay. Killian Murphy crushed it. I think it was great. It was stunning. Um I agree with what you said. Subject matter was heavy, but it was still really good. Also, just a side note, seeing Einstein in context that he was alive during this like shook me to my core because I always thought of him as like really old, but in terms of our history, he's not.
Our history is just young, period.
It is, but it just like I was like, oh my god, that's Einstein. That is literally Albert Einstein. What is he doing here? So
You thought he was so cute throughout the whole
he
movie.
was so cute. The actor that played him was so cute. I just want him to be my grandpa.
Yeah.
That'd be so cute. Okay, so him.
So, Einstein in
So
Oppenheimer is
Einstein
Hannah's
and
number 9.
yeah. Well, he's really my number one. But okay, my number 8 is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Growing up as a young female in a religious home with some of those elements and her exploration, that really impacted me a lot.
Yeah, Kyla and I did a whole episode on Are You There, God? If you haven't seen that, it was like our third or fourth podcast episode, and we both really loved it too. So definitely worth checking out, whether or not you grew up as a young girl or not.
Yeah, but there are
No, but
things.
yeah, I can see that impacting you even more so for that
Yeah.
reasoning.
And we
Yeah,
had talked, there were things in there that I was like, I remember that. I
right.
did that. Yeah. So that was like a, I don't know, just say growing up with faith. Yeah, it was good. My number 7 is Asteroid City. I loved it. Same reasons for you. Um, but I had other things that impacted me a little deeper. So that's why it's not higher on the list. But Wes Anderson, brilliant. This, like you said, this felt like his movie. Fully recognized, fully
Self-actualized.
yeah, his self-actualized self as a filmmaker was this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if he agrees with that, but that's how I feel. Number 6 is Godzilla minus one. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's so good. It is not what I expected at all, and I'm so glad it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was so much better than I could have ever imagined. And I love Godzilla, but this storytelling was chef's kiss. My number 5 is Poor Things. Again, fantastic. We did a whole review on it. We did a spoilies section. Spoilers. I call
Yeah.
them spoilies. It's a huge conversation, but I mean, it's in my top 5. But like I said, impact wise, it definitely impacted me. But it's one of those that I'm like, I've seen it. That was a lot. I'm good. um, my number 4 is Barbie. I I've really struggled with where I would put this on the list because I feel like it needs to be higher, but the other ones, I don't know. I was back and forth a lot with it. It was so impactful to me. Just it was so fun. It was so fun, first of all. They did such a great job with it. And I think about America Ferrera's speech about what it means to be a woman at least twice a week.
I mean, she got nominated for an Oscar just for that
And she
speech.
fucking deserves it.
Yeah, I
Like
agree.
so many people are up in arms cuz Barbie didn't get nominated for like best picture or
It
whatever.
did. It
It
didn't get
did?
nominated for Best Actress in a Leading Role.
Oh. Oh.
It got nominated in 8 categories, or 7 categories, but 8 nominations.
Yeah. I mean, Margot Robbie killed it, but America Ferrera deserves every credit that she possibly can get. So I'm like, I don't know. Don't get up in arms about Margot when you've got America. Okay, and then my number 3 is Maestro. I loved it. I know this isn't a review film, so I'm just gonna keep going because I could honestly talk about my top 3 a lot. Maestro was incredible. Bradley Cooper.
Hannah never remembers who Bradley Cooper is, or she didn't until this movie. Now, every time he pops up, she's like, hey, that's Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, it's like it's not even that he was ever a bad actor, but he never impacted me in the way that I was fully impacted by his performance in Maestro. Like the man got me.
He gives himself to this movie.
Oh, he fully gives himself to
Mhm.
this role and
Yeah,
it's so
and
stunning.
as the director.
The performances are outstanding to me. And as somebody who has a background in like theater and acting, and it just sticks with me. My number 2 is The Killer. Fuck, that's a good movie. Like, I told Mikiah, after we watched it, I was like, I could watch that again without any sound and be just as enthralled
Mhm.
in that film. And to me, that is volumes. That says so much about the acting and just the quality of the film.
Fincher's compositions are incredible. He's so meticulous.
Oh, and the way they used music.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
This is almost to me like his Asteroid City. It's almost Fincher doing like leaning so hard into his tendencies to the point of like maximizing them within a single film. And I loved it too. It made my honorable mentions, but yeah,
Oh,
it's
so
great.
good.
Yeah.
So good. Okay, and then my number 1 is actually Past Lives, which is your number 10.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know, this is just a personal thing for me, like, I'm such a feeler and an empathic person, and, like, I've fallen in love a lot in my life, and I don't know, it just is so impactful to me personally for who I am, and it was stunning, like, that move after that movie, I just cried a lot because it was so good. I do have honorable mentions. I think Suzume was so lovely. I loved
Mhm.
it. Also, Guardians Volume 3 was, I think it was so great the way that they wrapped that up. John Wick 4 is probably my favorite action like series of all time. Like I love the John Wick movies, but as far as like specifically emotionally impactful, it just wasn't in my top 10. Also, Elemental.
Elemental's great.
We left the theater and I said Pixar made a rom-com. And the
Mhm.
Pixar made a rom-com, and I loved it so much.
Yeah.
And there's the whole, like, cultural aspect to
Mhm.
it, and, it's so great. I love it. It's wonderful. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Pixar made a rom-com. And then this one okay, if you don't know, I am a huge fan of Beyoncé. I love her. She's my queen. Um, I loved Renaissance. I fucking loved it. The only reason it is not like my number one is because it's more of a documentary slash concert film than an actual, like, this is a movie. But I love that woman.
It's a great, like, film, like, experience going to the theater and watching that was really great.
It was so much fun.
Yeah.
I could talk about Beyonce probably for 3 hours alone because she's so talented, and the set pieces, holy shit, those were incredible. If I could see if I could afford to see a Beyonce concert one time before I died, just one time,
It'll happen.
that would be a 30-year dream come true. So, gotta give props to my girl. But yeah, those are my top 10
Yeah. Barbie didn't make my honorable mentions, but I did really
because he's
enjoy
a
it.
sexist.
'Cause yes, 'cause I'm a sexist. I really liked it.
No, he's not.
I just, it didn't fall within my, like, top 20, just outside, but I do think it's a great film still, so yeah, so that's kind of our, like, best in class, our individual top 10 lists, but so the rest of this, we're going to focus on some superlatives. And this is more of an opportunity. I've created 8 special awards designed to talk about other films that provided a unique experience or deserved special mention outside of the best in class. And so going through those,
Hmm.
this this
I did not see this list.
well, you can chime in if you have one that sticks out in your mind as something that's true for you.
Okay.
But so my first award, my first superlative is most laughs. And for me, that goes to theater camp.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's the return of the mockumentary in true form. I love stuff like Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show and all of those films. And we just haven't really seen that in the same capacity. And it's really great having that come back. I grew up not necessarily being a theater kid myself, but
I was.
around, yeah, Hannah was a theater kid, and I grew up around theater kids. So my life has been surrounded by them. So the setting felt very specific and well presented. And it was very funny. I wish I could have seen it in theaters, but we did get to catch it once it hit streaming.
Okay, hard agree. Hard
Hard
agree.
agree? Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Most tears. So I'm not a big crier during movies. So whenever a movie really makes me cry, like that deserves special mention. I only had one movie for this, but I watched another one recently that made it on here. So my first one there is The Iron Claw. Was not expecting to be as stirred by that. There's a specific moment towards the end of the film that just really made me feel the weight of it all. And I just started crying, and some theater attendant walked in right as the credits started rolling. And I'm just wiping tears from my eyes and trying to like gather myself as quickly because I was the only one in that theater. But yeah, otherwise, I just watched this one a few days ago and it made my honorable mentions. It might even be worthy of a top 10 spot. But Society of the Snow was a movie that I didn't really want to watch, but it was nominated for some Oscars, so I was like, "Oh, I'll watch it." And I was so worn down by it, but then by the time it got to the end of that series with the true story and everything, man, I was weeping in a way that a movie hasn't made me do in a long time. So,
Yeah, for me, I didn't see either of those, but Past Lives. Past
oh
Lives
yeah,
would make the cut for me with that one. And then I know this might sound crazy, but
Hannah's almost crying right
I
now.
know Mikiah told me about the Iron Claw and like one of the final moments, and I'm just thinking about it and crying. So I think that definitely wins.
Yeah, if you've seen it, the whole line where he's like, "We can be your brothers," just got me. It sent me into a place of tears. So yes,
Which I'm currently am just thinking about it, and I haven't even seen the
yeah.
film.
So the award for most tears, I do think, goes to the Iron Claw, simply because it made Hannah cry without even seeing. But Society of the Snow made me weep like no film has in a long time. All
Even
right.
more question, even more than Brokeback Mountain?
Yeah, I didn't really like cry during Brokeback Mountain.
We have different memories then.
You wept during Brokeback Mountain. I did cry, but it's not like
But
This one had a different.
you cried pretty hard for comparatively.
It was not the same.
Oh, okay.
This one I went into the shower and cried afterwards. I
Oh,
kept
damn.
crying. Yeah.
Okay, okay. All
Yeah.
right, jeez.
All right, next category is the Adrenaline Rush Award. This is just for to recognize the impact that a movie had in terms of that, like just getting your heart racing. And for me this year, it was Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One. I liked John Wick 4 more than Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One, but there's something about the last few Mission Impossible movies, more Fallout even more than this one, but this one really still continued it with Christopher McQuarrie's direction, just like keeping the energy up the whole time, the intensity up the whole time. That yeah, just watching that movie, I just you feel almost jittery from like the blood pumping. So yeah, that's for me the biggest adrenaline rush I got from a movie this year.
Mm, I don't remember it. Um, but I
There's
don't know.
a AI threat. There's a
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's good. That
yeah,
was a
he
good
does
one.
the bike off the cliff at the end. There's the whole train
Oh,
sequence.
yeah. That one's good. But still, for me, this might be weird,
Hmm.
but Creed 3,
Hey, yeah, absolutely.
I really loved that one.
Hmm.
And that I was like on edge. That was really good to me, and John Wick 4, of course. But
Yeah.
Creed 3 was like kind of surprising to me of how much I was like, "Ooh, what's gonna happen?"
Yeah, those fight scenes were great
Oh,
too.
they were
It was very unique
phenomenal.
how he did that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess adrenaline rush from me goes to Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, and for Hannah goes to Creed 3. All right. Biggest surprise. So there's two of these that I picked for the biggest surprise of the year. One being Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I thought this movie was a blast. It kind of reminded me more so of the Marvel that we were getting before, in terms of the integration of humor and genuine character and pathos, but then also having kind of that Princess Bride flavor, that Stardust flavor of just kind of a big fantasy world that's just a lot of fun. I'm not even a D&D person, so that's part of why I was like not really looking forward to this, but I was like, this was a great time. The other one that was a really big surprise for me, and this is as a fan of this particular franchise, was Saw X. I never would have thought that another Saw movie would come around and I'd be like, this is one of the best in the franchise. And the 10th one out of all of them did that for me. Saw X is actually really good for you Saw fans out there. If you missed that one because you're kind of worn out on the series, check that one out. It's really good. All right. Did you have any movies that you were absolutely surprised by this year?
Also, Dungeons and Dragons, I
Yeah.
didn't think it would be like I was excited for it
Hmm.
because I thought if they do it really well, that'll be super fun, but I don't know. And then they did it really well, and I was like,
Yeah.
sweet. So, yeah, I agree with that one. I don't watch scary movies because
Yeah.
I don't, but so I
Hmm.
can't speak to Saw, but
Yeah.
D&D, good one.
Yeah. All right. The next one, we're okay. We have a couple. We're not just all positivity here all the time. The next superlatives are more in the negative light of things because the year's not all sunshine and rainbows. So the next category is biggest disappointment, kind of the opposite of surprise here. And for me, that was Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the first two Ant-Man movies. Like I said, I like pretty much every Marvel movie to some extent or another. Just on a baseline level enjoyment, have enjoyed pretty much every single movie in this universe, even like Thor: The Dark World. And this one just left me feeling absolutely cold. This is, I think, the worst film that's ever come out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe pretty easily. And it was, even not expecting too much from it, I was still let down by just how bad I thought it was.
Uh, yeah, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
uh, I'm not like, "Oh, this movie was ass," but, like, out of all the movies I have seen,
Yeah.
I I was expecting more from Marvel because they
Mhm.
have built up a franchise thing where
Yeah.
they release something and it usually hits. This one wasn't really a hit. It was like, "Yeah, Paul Rudd,
Yeah.
woo!"
I
And
guess
then,
yeah.
I don't know.
For me, it was like a year full of really disappointing DC movies. I did kinda like The Flash. I liked The Flash, but every other DC movie that came out last year was, I thought, pretty dull and bad. But even among all of those subpar DC films that came out, I thought Ant-Man and the Worst and the Wasp was worse. So that's if that's where the disappointment falls, there, because I was expecting less from those DC movies and got about what I expected. Whereas here, I was hoping it could be better, and it just wasn't. It
Oh,
was worse.
you know what else for me? Indiana Jones Dial of
You
Destiny.
know what? Yes.
Yeah,
You know what?
that was disappointing to me.
That
Love
one,
Harrison Ford.
yeah.
He's fantastic always. But that one, I was like, really?
Yeah, I think I was ultimately more skeptical about that one still just because it was like going back to Indiana Jones again, and he's now this much older than he was even the last time. I think that one might be even a more of a like a might be even a bigger disappointment. I don't know. I still think I might put Quantumania as my biggest disappointment, but that one's up there for sure.
I'm a huge Indiana
Same,
Jones fan.
same.
Like big time, big Indiana Jones girly over
Yeah,
here. And so I was actually really excited. I wasn't like, what are they doing? I was like, okay, let's see.
yeah.
And then I was like,
Yeah, I
oh.
guess for me, the thing that I give Quantumania the edge for is that it's supposed to be setting up so much more with the Kang character and everything, and that movie botched it so hard they're now moving away from that character entirely. So
Oh, he's a cool character.
he's a cool character, but they're just like, we messed up.
No,
And
that's why I'm like, that is disappointing.
yeah, so yeah, there's greater like just its place in the universe could have been more interesting than it was. Whereas Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, like if it wasn't good, which it wasn't very good, I can just kind of forget it because I can always watch those first three Indiana Jones films, and it doesn't have any bearing anywhere else. Whereas this one sets up disappointment for future movies, even so, like Quantumania. All right. Um, oh wait, you know what? There are a couple other categories that I forgot about. So the next one is, I would say, this is our most slept on. And for this one, I'm going, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. But I
Mm.
also have a couple others in Flora and Son on Apple TV Plus.
It's
It's
great.
great. It's
It's
the
so great.
director of Sing Street, Begin Again, Once, him doing his thing, very Irish, very music heavy, and it's really just a lovely film. And you should check it out if you have Apple TV, but that's probably why it's slept on because they didn't really promote it. It didn't get theatrical release. So otherwise, Missing, which is kind of the follow up to the movie Searching, it's all on computer screen, the whole film.
Hmm.
Um, and
I also slept on it.
I loved Searching. I went to go see Missing, and I was like, Missing is it's a good time. Like, it's a really unique way to make a movie on a budget, especially, and they do a really good job with these movies. They don't feel so cheap and gimmicky, despite the fact that they're obviously cheap and gimmicky. They just do a good job with it, and I think that more people should check out those movies. But yeah, I've talked about Margaret a lot, doing a whole episode on it because I felt it was so slept on.
Mm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's
Mm.
so good. And Rachel McAdams' performance in that, uh,
Oh, yeah, I think that she should have been nominated for an
yeah,
Oscar.
she should have.
Yeah,
She was
absolutely. Especially
fantastic.
especially in the Best Actress Supporting category, I don't feel like is, like, the tightest competition this year. She could definitely have been nominated, but that type of role just doesn't get nominated. That's a side tangent, but yeah. Alright, our next superlative is the Do Not Watch with Your Parents
Or
award,
children.
or children in this case. But there's always a movie that comes out that gets a lot of acclaim, and then you watch it and you're like, oh, I should not watch this with my parents. And if you did watch it with your parents, I'm sorry. In the past, this would have been something like The Shape of Water or something like that. This year, it's Poor Things.
100%.
Do not watch this with your parents. Only watch it with somebody that you trust and are comfortable around.
To
That's,
see nakedness and sex.
yes, presented very much so in your face in a film.
Yeah.
All right. But okay, this is our last superlative, and this is the worst of the year. So I have picked my three least favorite films from the year to put down here at the bottom. And I'm going to do this in order of which ones I think are worse. But my number three worst film of the year is Five Nights at Freddy's. this is a movie that I guess just wasn't made for me because it was only made for those specific fans of the game, because they're the only people that seem to have liked this movie, because this movie sucks. There's some interesting things. I think the animatronic work is nice, done by the Henson Company. I liked Matthew Lillard's presence in the movie. There are redeemable aspects. I liked seeing Josh Hutcherson lead a movie that, got this kind of attention again. But yeah, I don't know what this movie was going for. It's just like this weird, he's just asleep and dreaming, and it's awful. Like, I was kind of nice to it in my review, just kind of, I wasn't trying to go too hard on it, but man, this was one of the absolute worst films I saw last year, easily. It's a horror movie without any scares. It seems tailor made for children, but also too dark for children. I don't understand its appeal. I've not played the games. That's obvious because everybody who plays the game says this is such a great adaptation. And I'm like, well, this just makes me not want to play the games even more. So, yeah, it's my number three worst. My number two worst is an Apple TV original in Ghosted with Chris Evans and Anna de Armas. Really painful spy comedy where Anna de Armas gets to play the spy and Chris Evans plays this boyfriend who really likes her and then ends up tracking her and then getting involved in her spy adventure, and it's just painfully dull. You would think these two charismatic people would have good chemistry, and I don't know if they do or not because it gets completely lost in whatever else is going on here. It's just a bad, bad movie. One of these streaming originals that just, ugh, just bad. Yeah, it's just bad. Um, but finally, my number one worst movie of the year was Rebel Moon Part One: A Child of Fire. Um, if you listen to the Sucker Punch video, I already said that I don't even think Sucker Punch is Zack Snyder's worst because this movie exists. It's so painfully dull, and it's not like Sucker Punch where at least you have a lot of original ideas going on, even if they're coming across in very unoriginal ways. This movie's just pastiche to the extreme. It's literally just Seven Samurai done again, but in space with Star Wars flavor, and it's so obvious, and nothing about it stands out as being worth your time at all. This is the most boring movie, and it's only a part one. It ends on a cliffhanger. I do not want to watch the second part. To me, it's the worst movie of
But
the
you're
entire
gonna.
year. I might if
But
I
you're gonna.
feel
I know you're gonna watch it.
probably,
Yeah.
probably
That's what you do. You watch movies,
I
man.
do. So I try not to watch too many of the awful ones, but when it's just readily available and it is kind of a talking point, I get curious enough to check it out. And that's what happened here. I wish I didn't though, because it's so boring. It's the worst ever slow-mo speed up stuff that he's ever done. The visuals are like sometimes interesting, but mostly just jarring and bad looking sets and CGI backdrops and stuff.
That's worse than Sucker Punch, which I know didn't come out this past year, but
Sucker Punch is like your brain is just trying to fathom how they came up with this and funded it, and
Sucker Punch made me hate you and Kyle for like like an hour because I was like, why the fuck did they pick this movie?
I don't think you'd be able to make it through Rebel Moon. I think
Oh
you'd
boy.
be so painfully bored by it that you wouldn't be able to get through. Sucker Punch is at least confusing in its awfulness.
Yeah.
This movie's just like straight up as bad as it gets right in front of you all the time. There's nothing redeemable about it, really. I will say the actors aren't the worst in the world there. Zack Snyder's films, it's never the actor's fault. They do a good enough job with the material that they're given. They're just not given anything. So
Okay. I didn't see any of those, but based on the movies that I've seen, which again are like 33-ish out of a million, I feel like my worst of the year is actually Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
oh really? Yeah.
Yeah, because I think the concept was interesting and like how brutal the fights are with the kids, whatever, but I wanted to see more of Snow. I honestly, I'm sorry, I didn't give a fuck about the girl character. Like, she comes up and she sings this rebellious song. What she's a great singer, whatever, great. But I wanted to have some sort of feelings about Snow, and I didn't get enough of his background or motivation or characterization of him or honestly even her. Like, I was really just like, okay, give me half of everything, half of characterization and half of a plot, basically. So I don't,
Yeah.
I just, as somebody who enjoyed the Hunger Games franchise, I, no,
Yeah.
no, no. Except the very last scene in the very
The very
last
last scene in
movie.
the last in Mockingjay Part 2 like rubbed you the wrong way, and then this I feel like just continued on
Yeah,
that.
just for
This movie
me,
just soured you on the whole franchise for a
it
minute.
really
Yeah, you're
did.
like, "That was a waste of time that I watched this," is
Yeah,
what you said?
yeah, that's how I felt. I was like, well, this is just a waste of
Yeah.
my
I
time.
didn't like that movie either. I didn't, like, hate it like you, I just found it to be I felt very apathetic towards it, so it's kind of right.
For me,
Yeah.
that is it not doing a good
Yeah.
job because
Oh,
I
yeah, it didn't
feel
do a good job.
the way I feel so deeply about things,
Mhm.
I'm just like it goes from if I'm
Right.
apathetic, then I'm like, okay, now I have an opinion and I hate it
Yeah.
because you made me feel nothing.
Alright, well, that's it for the superlatives. Um, let us know if you have any favorite movies, if any of these superlative categories, if you wanna fill it out and put in the comments what your picks are for those categories or just your best of the year in general, let us know. Um, Hannah, I have one final question for you, and it's how do you feel about this year as a whole in film? Like, what would you say it is? Do you think that this was really strong? Like, on a scale of F to A plus, what would you grade this year in film? It's a big question, but because there are a lot of really strong films.
And then a lot of like meh.
There are a lot of underwhelming films. I don't think I've been to the theater as many times in a year and felt, like I said, apathetic towards the movies I was watching. There are just a lot that
And you went
just
like
didn't hit
twice
for
as
me.
much as I did.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Out of the ones that I actually watched, because I don't know much about the others. So it's hard for me to say as a whole. And I do want to remind everybody we did not see every movie. So if you're up in arms about something, I don't know. We probably didn't see it or I don't
I
know.
guess I'll say is okay, I think the blockbusters of the year, particularly in the first 2/3 of the year, were extremely underwhelming up until the point where so we had
Until Barbenheimer.
like the ones that are at the top though, like Guardians 3, Barbie Oppenheimer, um, those ones are great, but there's the great ones and then the drop off is steep because then what are supposed to be your tentpole films are like
Mm,
all of these other superhero movies, which none of the other ones landed other than Guardians and Spider-Verse for me for the whole year.
yeah.
And Indiana Jones was a big disappointment. Hunger Games was a disappointment. Mario Bros. To me, while it was a massive hit, I thought the movie wasn't very good.
Yeah, that one's interesting because we saw that with our nephew who loved it.
Oh yeah, it's for kids.
It's absolutely for kids. And if it's just a kids thing, I'm like go for it. That's great for them. But as like a a person who's played Mario, as soon as I could hold a controller basically, uh it was disappointing
Yeah.
as well. So, I don't know. Okay, honestly, with like the high highs and the low lows, I I feel like maybe I'd give it like a B minus.
Yeah, I think that for me, there just weren't those absolute 100%, like I said, just peaks for the year. Usually in a year, there's like two or three movies that like I said, absolutely just like floor me. And I didn't get that this year. I didn't get a movie this year that just blew me away in its entirety. Like, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Usually I get at least
That's a
one of those.
really high
It's a
standard.
high standard, but pretty much every year has a movie like that, that enters like, it's a broad way to say anything is whatever your all time is, but And I
Mm,
didn't get a movie like that this year that's like to that level of like this is one of my favorites. And that's but there are, I will say, like I said, it was hard to still pin down a top 10 because there are a lot of really great films.
mm.
There just weren't those like absolute peaks. And then there were also a lot of disappointments. So yeah, I think for me this year I'd give it like a B.
Is is B lower than a B minus?
It's slightly higher.
Yeah.
But I think that there were enough
Okay.
really strong movies, particularly in the later end of the movie year. If we ended this year in like June, it would be like a C minus, you know. but
I don't know. I got A's.
but yeah, I guess that's the official grade here then. Or do you want to say it's a B or B minus then?
No, I go with B then.
Okay,
Yeah, B is fine. Because I did have those movies for me, like
yeah,
past lives. Okay, y'all. I'm a therapist. Not at home, but in my job, I'm a therapist, and I literally assigned some people to watch past lives and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and like I I therapeutically was able to talk about some of these movies that were in my top 10
hmm,
because of the emotional impact, and, like, to me, that's a big deal.
yeah,
That's a really big deal to me.
yeah.
So, for me, yeah, I'm fine giving it a B.
Okay, yeah, so that's the Great American Movie Review scorecard for the year. That is we're giving this year, 2023, a B for the state of film and what we got overall. Obviously, we didn't see everything, but just that's our perspectives on it. Um, yeah, if you liked this kind of video, I'm planning on doing some variation of this every year. Might be more refined in the future, might be the same kind of thing.
Oh,
Just
no.
let us know if you liked this. And once again, just let us know what your top 10 of the year were in the comments. But thank you for joining us. That's going to do it for this episode or that's going to do it for this movie report card. But yeah, thank you. My name's Mikiah.
And I'm Hannah.
And yeah, that'll do it. See you at the movies.
Adios.